Striking teachers may soon be deemed criminals. That's if the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill goes ahead in its current form. The changes propose criminalising any and all school disruptions. Cosatu is welcoming the bill, but is wary of that specific clause. It's also not comfortable that alcohol sales will be allowed on school grounds. Let's find out some more now from Cosatu's Parliamentary Coordinator, Matthew Parks, who joins us virtually from Cape Town. Matthew, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, as always. You've got quite a long list of the various parts of these changes that you agree with, but there's specific bits that you do have issue with. One of them, of course, being there being a ban on or an outlawing of all kinds of disruptions at school. What specifically is your issue here? The obvious one would be that it would make it difficult for your members to be able to embark on any strike action that may have a disruptive impact on schooling. Speak us through what your issues are there.
Sure. So look, all our laws, when we pass them, must always pass constitutional muster. The Constitution is very clear that South Africa is a democracy. People have the right to protest, to picket, workers have the right to go on strike, for example. So those can't be interfered with, especially not by an education bill. So we understand the objective of the department when they drafted the bill was that they were concerned about community protests getting out of hand, communities out of anger for issue of service delivery or crime, for example, and then end up going and burning a school down. So that can't be correct. We agree with that. But there are laws already governing how you manage protests. You have the Regulation of Gatherings Act, which specifies what can be done, what can't be done, the roles of and the responsibility of the police to protect society, the public, property, and so forth. Similarly, with regards to the right to strike, the Labour Relations Act speaks to it. It speaks to the constitutional guidelines, when workers can go on strike, how they need to get permission, what are the picketing rules, and so forth. Where can they protest, where can't they protest, and all of that. So what we can't have is a good-intentioned, well-intentioned provision in the bill seeking to protect schooling, having such a broad, vague, unclear provision that simply says anybody who disrupts schooling will be guilty of a criminal offence. So, for example, if the catering staff chose not to provide lunchtime meals, that could be seen as a disruption of schooling, and those catering staff could simply then be sent to prison. That can't be correct. So the bill needs to be cleaned up, needs to be made very specific that it speaks to violent protests, for example, but it can't be interfering with the workers' constitutional right to picket, to protest, or to strike within the parameters of the Constitution or the Labour Relations Act. So I think that's a simple thing. Bills can't overreach, they need to be within the parameters of the Constitution.
Because I'm sure you'll be in agreement that, especially as we've seen over the last while, because a disruption to schooling has a very negative impact on pupils specifically, that the Basic Education Department is obviously trying to get around preventing that kind of thing of happening far too often. But what I'm hearing from you is that you need the language of the changes to this bill to be more specific.
Yeah, all legislation has to be in line with the Constitution, no matter what. There's not a choice. One can't ignore it. It'll be a slippery slope if we start allowing individual laws to undermine the Constitution. So again, if a teachers' union wants to go on strike, for example, there are processes they have to embark upon. There are picketing rules in place in the Labour Relations Act, which guide when you can do so and how you can't do so. So there'll be no, kind of infringement upon anybody's rights. But I think also for us to speak upon experience as well, I would be shocked if the Department of Education can tell us when last did the teachers' union go on strike. Teachers' union, in fact, are quite jealously protective of learners' rights during exams. You'll find, for example, right now, whilst public servants have gone on strike, the teachers' union said they respect other workers' rights to go on strike. They themselves are not doing so because they're right now focused on matric exams. So we think there is already a sympathy around learners' rights to education, but it can't be at the right of workers to picket, to protest, to strike, and so forth within the parameters of the law. So we don't think it's a difficult thing to do. It has to be, though, to address, because you can't sacrifice one right to achieve another right. You have to constantly find in laws the right balance that protects everybody's rights. And we think it is quite easy to do so. And again, protests are governed by one law, strikes are governed by another law. The Constitution gives an overall framework. So we shouldn't be finding clumsy legal drafting inadvertently and undermining those constitutional rights.
You used the phrase deeply opposed when addressing the bill's proposals to allow alcohol to be sold on school premises as part of their fundraising purposes. Now, from a practical point of view, one gets the sense that if they want to have a cheese and wine function or something like that to raise funds at the school. Are you fearful that even just allowing something like that would open up the floodgates, as it were, to the abuse of alcohol on school premises?
So look, I mean, we recognize there's a role for alcohol in society. In the Western Cape, for example, the wine industry is the backbone of agriculture. So it's a critical, jobs-rich sector, from the wine farms to the transportation, the distilleries, the packaging, the retail sector, etc. But we also have to weigh up into account society's broader interests, including young people. We have a real problem with alcohol abuse in this country. We are shamefully leaders in the world of fetal alcohol syndrome, especially in the Western Cape along the farms. Alcohol abuse has a strong component of road accident victims. About 40% of our road accidents are because of alcohol abuse. We've seen alcohol abuse being really at a central point in terms of gender-based violence, domestic violence, violence on the weekends, etc. We also, during the previous New Year's, when alcohol was banned over New Year's, our Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital was empty for the first time in terms of the casualty unit. So we also fear for the young people are especially impressionable as part of learning. And, showing that alcohol is cool, selling alcohol at schools, we fear is going to send a wrong message to society that alcohol is cool. Now that we can prohibit alcohol. Teachers themselves also complain that they don't want to be having to manage the issues of alcohol while also trying to protect learners. So we think for the time being, for this decade, for example, we shouldn't be allowing alcohol at schools full stop. There should be other ways to fundraise money for schools, but we need to constantly look at what are the messages we're sending to young people for the time being, how we manage to address the alcohol pandemic, but we need to find the right balance. We're fearful the bill is actually sending the wrong message to society that alcohol is a good thing right now.
Matthew, just before I let you go, you've also touched on a call that Cosatu would like the compulsory school years to be changed from grade 9 to grade 12, that pupils would not be allowed to leave school at grade 9 because, and this has been an issue, we see it year in and year out, that children are leaving grade 9 because they can, but they're entering a work place or work environment where very little jobs are available, let alone if you've got a grade 12. From what I understand, the Basic Education Department is planning changes to their curriculum that it would allow for streams. Finally, after years and years of talking about it, allowing pupils to go into streams that would allow certain pupils to take an academic stream and others to go into a stream that will allow them to learn a craft or a skill at a vocational college or the like. Are you not entirely convinced that these changes from the Basic Education Department would strengthen that issue, that's seeing too many of our pupils leave school without any skill that they can apply to some kind of a money-earning job?
Yeah. So look, so the bill also requires that grade R will be a formal part of the school curriculum. So parents will be required to take their children to school from grade R. That's a fantastic provision. That's one of the positive things. We think it's going to help lay a foundation for a more successful career for many young people who often haven't attended grade R and then struggle when they get into grade 1. But we are also fearful, and we think Parliament should take that advantage because legislation doesn't come every 5 minutes. Comes maybe once in 5 years. On average, it takes about 5 years for bills to be passed into law. We think the time is right now that whilst the department is having these intentions in place, let's now put it into effect legally. We can take some time to allow it to be implemented. You have a staying provision in that regard. But we should not be condemning young people to a long life of unemployment or underemployment. It is quite worrying that right now we think it's okay to send children who are 15 years old or have reached grade 9 into the workforce. They're going to struggle to find jobs, let alone decent jobs. In an economy of an unemployment rate of 44%, with a youth unemployment rate of over 60 to 70%, even if they do manage to find jobs, they will often be very low-skilled, low-paying jobs. There will not be enough for them to take care of themselves, let alone their own families in the future, let alone their parents or their elderly relatives. We think it's best that children remain in school until grade 12, at least until the age of 18. If not, then as you're saying, let them off-ramp into some sort of vocational training at a TVET college. But everybody should be learning, should be acquiring an educational skill. We should not be sending young people into an economy with very little education, very little skills, and very few qualifications, because we're doing them an injustice. We're doing the economy an injustice. And if you look at the skill shortages that many employers complain about, it's partly because we've set up young people for failure when we should be investing their education, their skills, so that when they do enter the economy, they're well placed to find a decent job, to secure employment, and to be able to take care of themselves and the family.